Russia continues to mourn those killed during the 5 days of fighting in South Ossetia. The conflict may have calmed down, but the people in the capital Tskhinvali are still recovering from the nightmare of seeing their hometown become a battlefield. Russian peacekeepers are continuing to pull people from the rubble of destroyed buildings. Hundreds were hiding underground during the conflict, which almost completely destroyed the city. This old woman remained inside as fighting continues to rage above. Makeshift funerals are being held across the city. With so many bodies to deal with, some are having to be buried without coffins.
The Gagloevs are buried here, the father and son. They were killed during the shelling of Tskhinvali as they were trying to escape and save themselves.
Both the father and son were executed on the spot. We had to bury them near this house.
They exterminated the clergy and the people. The clergy bore the same fate as the Ossetian people. We don't have a lot of people anymore. Those that survived are trying to hold services, but it's not the right time for services now. The most important thing is to bury those who are not buried.
It will take at least 2 years to rebuild the capital of South Ossetia, Tskhinvali. That's according to the Russian Emergencies Ministry. The city was almost leveled to the ground during the conflict with Georgia, with up to 70% of buildings damaged or completely destroyed. RT's Oksana Boyko has met some of the residents who were lucky enough to survive the shelling, and you may find some of the images in her report disturbing.
It's no longer war, but peace is yet to come. Tanks stand idle, but people's limbs still lie on the streets. Flowers blossom where blood was spilled. Tskhinvali is growing quiet after 5 days of heavy fighting. Most of its residents have fled or died.
But this little fellow defied all odds. His mother, Shurana, arrived to hospital on the eve of the Georgian offensive. Her waters broke right after the bombing started.
The heavy shelling went non-stop. Our hands were shaking, but we were still able to deliver this baby boy. Praise God that he kept us all safe. You know, you can't completely annihilate Ossetians.
Shurana is still so traumatized by her ordeal, she can barely speak. She still doesn't know what happened to her family.
I know nothing about my relatives. My husband went fighting, but thank God my baby is okay.
But the majority of stories you hear in Tskhinvali these days are about death.
Father Georgi, the province's chief priest, has crossed the town on foot to see what's left of his once large flock.
60% of my parishioners were killed, annihilated. They particularly targeted churches because they knew that people tried to hide there.
Even priests find it hard to preach forgiveness these days, with local hospitals still overrun with the injured and people still searching for bodies underneath the rubble. Animosity is fierce. Even after his death, this Georgian soldier didn't stop being an enemy. But not everybody is so unforgiving. Soslan is 74. He's long been retired, but when the Georgian assault began, he and his dog Barsik became vigilantes.
We've been patrolling our great city of Tskhinvali for several days now.
A staunch supporter of independence, Aslan is far from hating the Georgians.
On the whole, the Georgian people are a good people. They're hard-working. I'm an Ossetian myself, and I can tell you the Georgians are probably even more hard-working than us.
It's no longer under assault, but Tskhinvali remains a hard place to live. Half of the city is in ruins, the other half is cut off from electricity and running water. Yet the city has put on a defiant face. This writing appeared just days ago. Many locals believe the Georgian government sold its land to the United States, but Ossetia, they say, is not for sale. Local shopkeepers took it quite literally, now distributing what's left of their supplies for free.
Since yesterday, I've been giving away everything I could to Russians and Ossetians. I gave away food like grain and juices and things like that.
While many of Tskhinvali landmarks were damaged during the bombardment, one monument withstood it all. It's dedicated to thousands of victims of the Georgia-South Ossetia conflict in the early 90s. Nobody thought history would repeat itself. These Georgian tanks have already become something of a local landmark. Hit by a Russian rocket, they were later set ablaze by the locals. And as the tanks were ravaged by fire, Georgia's hopes of bringing South Ossetia into its fold by the use of military force also turned to ashes. Oksana Boyko, RT, Tskhinvali, South Ossetia.
Dozens of civilians who died in South Ossetia have been laid to rest. As Russia mourns the dead, more details of the tragedy in South Ossetia are coming to light. Some families have been devastated. Many were killed while fleeing to safety. Igor Piskunov has this report.
As the day of mourning has been announced across Russia, many funerals of those killed in South Ossetia are being held in Vladikavkaz in North Ossetia. On August the 9th, Eduard Gagloev and his wife Zalina Tibilova were on their way from Tskhinvali to North Ossetia when they saw a group of soldiers wearing white armbands. Such armbands are usually worn by peacekeepers in the region. So they stopped, and then something shocking allegedly happened.
Georgian soldiers were dressed to deceive. They had white armbands, like those worn by South Ossetian peacekeepers, and they tricked these people into getting inside the car, shot them, closed the doors, and set it on fire.
Eduard and Zalina's son was driving just dozens of meters ahead and saw his parents being murdered. For understandable reasons, we couldn't get his comments. We know he also became a target. As the Georgians opened fire at his car, he ran out and had gone several dozen kilometers through a forest before reaching safety. A family friend says Eduard and Zalina were not the only ones murdered while trying to escape.
These people were civilians, and everyone loved them. They never did any harm to anyone. Only good things. They fired a grenade launcher at them for starters, and then their car was riddled with bullets from a machine gun. It was no longer a car, it's a sieve. How brutal do you have to be to act like this? Even savage beasts wouldn't do that. And this isn't the only case. Along the road you could see many cars with bodies inside, bodies of women and children. Nobody is looking for them, because all their relatives are dead. They have all been destroyed.
Many of those who attended this funeral are from South Ossetia. Most of them also lost relatives or friends in either this or previous conflicts in the region. Nevertheless, they say they will never give up and leave their motherland, South Ossetia.
Of course, we'll all come home. No Ossetians are leaving this land, ever.
Perhaps it's not the flags put at half-mast on government buildings, but the faces of these people that illustrate the real grief and horror the Ossetians have been put through. Ossetian funerals are attended by family members, friends, colleagues, and neighbors. It seems like the whole community mourns. A great Ossetian poet once said, "No funeral is better attended than ours." Igor Piskunov, RT, Vladikavkaz, Republic of North Ossetia, Alania.
Harsh memories of 5 days of bombing still linger in the minds of the residents who remain in the South Ossetian capital, Tskhinvali. Many survived thanks only to the cellars they were hiding in during the Georgian assault on the city. Naida Azizova has met some of those who endured many tough hours underground.
This apartment block in the center of Tskhinval looks lifeless, but it's not. Zoya and her husband have just surfaced from the building's basement. And they've just had a meal, for the first time in many days.
We were in the basement with the child, my grandson. We carried him down there in a baby carriage, and my daughter covered him like that with her arm.
We stayed in the basement and tried to remain as quiet as possible. Otherwise they would have killed us. I'm amazed myself how our grandson didn't cry the whole time.
Boris, the husband, is showing us their hideout. In this small and wet corridor, they were hiding from Georgian soldiers, just a few meters below. With no water, no food, and no help, they could only pray to God.
Everyone was crying and shaking. All of us were scared. People kept saying, "That's it, we'll be killed."
Valery, the other resident, also came down when the Georgian troops entered Tskhinval.
What did I feel? It's too bad I couldn't find a weapon. How many times can you destroy us? Now I don't have any emotions.
Despite all the inconvenience, Valery with his 90-year-old mother still stays in the cellar because they had nowhere to go. His flat upstairs has been totally destroyed. Debris lies everywhere, no single building remains intact. The firing has stopped and life is slowly returning to normal. But the people here say what has happened will stay with them for the rest of their lives. Maida Azizova, RT, from Trinval, South